Lately, the Gen X work ethic, the same one that built our careers, is being labeled as a problem. Managers call it a lack of collaboration. We call it just wanting to get the job done and go home. So, is Gen X just quietly checking out? Or have we finally had it up to here with a system that doesn't seem to hold promise anymore? Either way, Gen X doesn't seem to fit the workplace very well lately. There seems to be a growing mismatch between the way work used to function and the version that's taken over right now. So, what should we actually do about it if we want to survive the next 10 years in this workforce? Okay, so this first section, I want to talk about how we work. And the first friction point is we push back. Gen X doesn't automatically say yes anymore. If something extra gets added, especially if it's outside the job we were hired to do, we pause. And that pause gets us labeled with a bad attitude. But it's not attitude, it's awareness. Gen X has already done the years of overextending, overcommitting, picking up the slack without question. And now it can start to feel like the expectation isn't to just do the job, but to overproduce and compensate for people that aren't pulling their weight. We feel our perspective shifting from achievement to protecting our energy. So when something new gets added, the question becomes, is this actually necessary or is this just more? Okay, friction point number 2 is that we don't ask for help. Gen X will sit with a problem longer than we probably should. And this isn't anything new, and it's not because we don't want help. It's because we're used to figuring things out. A lot of us grew up that way. We grew up handling things on our own. At work, initiative wasn't just appreciated, it was expected, especially in the era where we all started our careers. So that mindset has stuck around all these years. Solve it, fix it, move on. No meeting required. But now, all of a sudden, that gets interpreted as a lack of collaboration. Like we're not team players. I mean, come on. Give me a break. Okay, friction point number 3 is we don't want micromanaging. And this is a big one. We don't want or need constant oversight. We don't need multiple check-ins to prove that we're working. We don't need meetings to talk about the work we're already doing. We're used to being trusted to handle things. I mean, a lot of us had house keys around our necks at the age of 10. So that level of independence, it stuck. But now all the checking in, the reporting, the constant visibility, we know that you feel like you need it, but we're over it. We don't like or want to be treated like slacker adolescents. Okay, so these 3 have been about how Gen X works, but the bigger shift is how we think about work altogether. So let's get to that next section. So when it comes to how Gen X thinks, friction point number 4, we're skeptical. Show me a Gen Xer that gets excited about every new idea at work, and it's a safe bet that they've had way too much coffee or they're being sarcastic. Every new initiative, every new system, every new direction. We've heard it before. We've also watched enough of them come and go. So instead of jumping in, we wait and we watch, because most of the time we've seen how this plays out. We're also getting used to much of the conversations focusing on the younger generations. And I mean, That's expected. And if the younger generations weren't so different in their work style and their work ethic than us, then maybe it wouldn't be as much of a problem. But now it's all about remote work and career tracks and new expectations that are usually framed around Gen Zs and millennials. And in the meantime, Gen X can almost be invisible in these discussions. And that lack of attention and recognition, that can increase that skepticism, even when we're still a major part of the workforce. Okay, friction point number 5 is we don't have a problem with all technology. We can learn new systems. We've already learned all of them. We went from no internet to smartphones and everything in between, and to whatever platform just rolled out last week. That's not the issue. The issue is it never stops. You barely learn one thing before it's replaced by something else. And after a while, the question becomes, why are we constantly replacing what already worked? At some point, you start wondering if it's to improve work or just to keep the IT department busy. We were always also fed the line that technology, it's going to make your life so much easier. Well, one thing we've actually seen is how it's blurred boundaries that don't stop at the end of the workday anymore. And when that constant accessibility contributes to burnout, and it can, we naturally want to draw the line. And that makes us look resistant. Okay, friction point number 5 is we don't promote ourselves. We've made it this far without constant praise and waving a "look at me" banner. We just don't talk about what we've done. We just do it. Finish the project, fix the problem, move on. All the self-promotion and back-patting, the constant visibility, it's a little much, and it can feel forced. And yeah, most Gen Xers, we come with a built-in BS detector as well. And we aren't allergic to success, we're just allergic to the parade that has to follow it. Nowadays, if you don't proclaim what you've done, it's like it didn't happen at all. And that's where we get overlooked. And when that keeps happening, disengagement, it's not surprising. It's almost inevitable. So now let's move on to the next section on what Gen X values. Okay, what does Gen X value? In friction point number 7, we're protecting our time better now. We've put in the hours, we've done all the working to impress, and maybe all that paid off. Or maybe it just showed us just how much we gave up for not much in return. So now we don't want to live to work. We've already paid our dues. We'll still do the job, but when the day ends, we're done. Because there's life outside of work. People to take care of, things that actually matter. And in a workplace where constant availability is expected, those lines that we're drawing, they get misread. Like we have a lack of commitment or worse, resistance. And where the younger generations can get by with this, attitude, Gen X is getting scoffed for it. Because we may have realized the whole work-life balance thing a little late in the game. But that doesn't mean that we can't play our card. And friction point number 8 is we value stability. We stay. Same role, same company, not because we're stuck, but because we chose it. Because it worked, because it was reliable, because it's just what you did. But that loyalty, it's not always noticed and it's rarely rewarded anymore. Seniority, it certainly doesn't carry the weight that it used to. In fact, it barely even exists anymore. Now the expectations involve movement, constant growth and constant change, even constant turnover. It's built into the system. And companies, they invest heavily in recruitment, while the people that stayed quietly get overlooked again. So now let's talk about, how do we survive the next 10 years? That's the question. How do you actually survive the next 10 years in this workforce without actually losing your mind or doing something unplanned or irrational? Because it's not about changing who you are or who we are as a generation. It's more about adjusting that version of you that shows up, translating it into something that might make sense in this environment. And number one is be the one who finishes things. Yeah, there's a lot of talk going on now. There's a lot of brainstorming, a lot of planning. But Gen X tends to be the group that just gets it done. And regardless of what companies are portraying, there is still value in that. So let's just lean into that. When everyone else is in their fourth meeting still talking about what might happen, be the one that quietly says it's already mapped out. Because at the end of the day, results still matter. And results tend to buy you a little space and a little grace. Now, number two is to be visible, just enough. And this one might be uncomfortable because a lot of us, we don't like the whole look at me thing. But being completely invisible doesn't quite work anymore either. So maybe it's not about promoting yourself, but just acknowledge what you've already done. One thing, once a week. Not a big speech, not a big performance. Just a simple email or conversation that this is done, whatever this is. And also, start keeping your own scorecard, in a Word document or a spreadsheet, even if it's just for you. At review time, you've got something that you can bring up, keeps you accountable. And number three is protect your focus. If everything at your workplace is just constant communication, collaboration, then real work for you has to happen some other way. So those boundaries, they might not be a problem in this case, especially when you can use them as a tool. Just blocking off time during your day that's meant for focus. Even shutting your door if you can. Turning things off for a while. Because that's where the work really and actually gets done. And being the person that produces something real, well, that still stands out. And number four is use your experience differently. And this one's subtle because what can look like resistance, that's really just pattern recognition. Now, Gen X has seen what works and what doesn't. So instead of just pushing back, just frame your response and your reaction a little differently. Not, this won't work. Instead, just say, this is what happened the last time we tried this. It lands a little better that way. And hopefully it can turn experience into something beneficial instead of something that immediately gets dismissed. So Gen Xers and Jonesers, we started our careers in a workplace where certain traits were highly valuable. Things like independence, initiative, even strong boundaries. We've worked hard, and those traits helped us get where we are today. But now, in some instances, those traits are starting to work against us. And that raises a real question. How are we supposed to respond to that? Now, I just think the workplace, it changed fast. And maybe in some ways, it's felt like that it's needed to respond to the times. But many of us, we're not on board with these new rules. So now we're in this position where what used to be strengths, they're being read as problems. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we don't fit anymore. Maybe in a way we never really did. Or maybe we've just seen what this is turning into and we're just not sold on it yet. I don't know. Only time will tell, I suppose. Now, if any of this or all of this sounds familiar, I'd be very curious. I'd love for you to tell me about it in the comments. Share your story with all of us. And also, do you think that this is just a Gen X thing? Or is this something that every generation goes through eventually? Now, either way, Gen X isn't done yet. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on. Let's play. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. Have a great week. Later.